Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our last episode, we discussed how Rimuru embarked on a battle with two true dragons, the Scorched Dragon and the Storm Dragon, to rescue the dominated Storm Dragon. With Ciel's assistance, Rimuru incarcerated the Scorched Dragon in the insulated prison, focusing solely on freeing the Storm Dragon. Fortunately, Rimuru discovered that Veldora's core was still intact. Thus, in a bid to reclaim the core, Rimuru devoured the dominated Storm Dragon, freeing it and simultaneously evolving into the world's fifth true dragon, the Ultimate Slime. In this episode, we continue to discuss Rimuru's battle with the Scorched Dragon Velgrynd and briefly touch upon the previously unmentioned battles in the Dwargon Nation. Let's get started. Having evolved into the fifth true dragon of the world, even as a subspecies, Rimuru's strength had undergone a qualitative enhancement. Even the clothing created from his emanating aura reached the highest mythic quality. On closer reflection, the reasons for such a significant leap in growth are threefold. Firstly, due to the impact of food chain, the power increase from the awakening of the 12 Guardian Lords reflected back to Rimuru. Secondly, he absorbed Veldora and acquired his power. Thirdly, the energy previously remaining in the stomach could now be analyzed and reclaimed. Strictly speaking, all these were possible due to the evolution of Lord of Wisdom, the birth of Ciel. To express his respect, Rimuru decided to address Ciel as Ciel's sensei. However, Ciel wasn't fond of this title, and the reasons are open to discussion. Thus, Rimuru stepped out from the evolutionary glow, taking stock of his surroundings and the state of the Storm Dragon. Naturally, Veldora's core was now in his possession, and by using Lord of Storm, he could resurrect Storm Dragon Veldora. It could be said that Rimuru's objective for this mission was accomplished, and the Imperial Army was no longer his concern. However, Rimuru's anger had yet to subside, and Emperor Rudra was unlikely to overlook Rimuru as a future threat. The situation had reached a point of no return, evidenced by the Scorched Dragon Velgrynd still confined in Rimuru's insulated prison, currently glaring venomously at Rimuru. The perspective shifts to Velgrynd, trapped in the insulated prison, and witnessed Rimuru devour the Storm Dragon and evolve. Velgrynd had ceased her attempts to escape, immobilized by disbelief at the unfolding events. According to the intelligence she had, this slime named Rimuru was an accidental creation from the magicule of the Storm Dragon, Veldora. But now, this slime had consumed the Storm Dragon, akin to its own progenitor, transforming into the world's fifth true dragon. This scenario defied all norms and logic, suggesting that Rimuru might have been an existence equivalent to the true dragon Veldora from the very beginning. Velgrynd was plagued with doubts. Was Rimuru truly an accidental birth from Veldora's magicule? After all, the chance of accidentally emerging alongside a true dragon and possessing a soul capable of harboring dragon factor was infinitesimally small. Furthermore, the entity Rimuru evolved into was not a true dragon in the truest sense but another creature capable of rivaling a true dragon, an idea Velgrynd found utterly unacceptable. Velgrynd realized the urgent need to eliminate this unique threat, as witnessing her own brother being consumed by a monster was something no one could rationalize calmly. As the 200 seconds elapsed, the insulated prison could no longer contain Velgrynd. It was evident that Velgrynd, the Scorched Dragon, cared deeply for her brother Veldora. Now, driven by the grief of losing her kin, the Scorched Dragon unleashed her fury and hostility towards Rimuru, disregarding her own safety in the process. However, Ciel calmly asserted that Velgrynd no longer posed a threat, as all necessary countermeasures had been fully prepared. Hearing Ciel's tone, Rimuru realized it was not just confidence but an almost arrogant disregard. While Rimuru considered reminding Ciel not to be overly confident, Ciel's prior performance made such concerns unnecessary. Turning to Velgrynd, Rimuru declared that the entire ordeal was the Empire's fault. Had Emperor Rudra not controlled the Storm Dragon to attack Rimuru, there would have been no need for Rimuru to engage in battle with Veldora. The enraged Scorched Dragon had no time for these explanations. Despite acknowledging Veldora's occasional lack of wisdom, Velgrynd couldn't fathom the idea of a true dragon being consumed by a mere slime. She was determined not to let Rimuru off the hook. In her furious state, Velgrynd began to spew flames everywhere, but to her dismay, these had no effect on Rimuru. However, the recent conversation made Rimuru realize something. Velgrind's fury stemmed from the misconception that Rimuru had killed Veldora. This misunderstanding could be easily resolved by releasing Veldora from the imaginary space, clearing up the confusion. But Veldora, the subject of the discussion, hastily intervened to stop Rimuru. Veldora, in a panic, urged Rimuru not to release him, explaining that his sister was in a state of rage over his apparent demise. Rimuru emphasized that it was precisely because of Velgrind's fury that he wanted to release Veldora to dispel the misunderstanding. Veldora, however, frantically argued against this, stating that if he were to be released and Velgrynd saw him unharmed, it would lead to an incredibly awkward situation. Velgrind's anger would then shift entirely from Rimuru to Veldora himself. As Veldora ranted and raved, Rimuru felt foolish for taking his words seriously. Just as he was about to reproach Veldora for being unreliable, Ciel also spoke up, advising against releasing Veldora. Ciel suggested taking advantage of the situation to optimize and modify Veldora's abilities, having already obtained Veldora's consent. The plan was to complete the modifications before performing the Storm Dragon release. According to Ciel, Veldora had been aware of the Great Sage's presence since his first consumption by Rimuru, and they had engaged in numerous conversations. Initially, Veldora mistook the voice for Rimuru's, but after Rimuru's ascension to True Demon Lord and the Great Sage's evolution into Lord of Wisdom, Veldora recognized the self-consciousness within Rimuru's abilities. This time, with Veldora's approval, his ultimate skill, Lord of Investigation, was being innovatively transformed towards Lord of Chaos. If Veldora were released now, he wouldn't be able to wield his original power strategically. Veldora hastily seized the opportunity to avoid conflict, expressing his eagerness to battle his sister again, but citing the ongoing modifications as a hindrance. Apologetically entrusting the entirety of combat to Rimuru, Veldora's words contradicted his earlier attitude. Rimuru, feeling it pathetic to take Veldora's words too seriously, and seeing Ciel's interest in the modifications, tacitly approved their approach. Speaking of modifications, Ciel proposed another idea: to integrate Rimuru's ultimate skills, Lord of Storm and Lord of Oath, to create a new ultimate skill, Lord of Starwind. However, Rimuru declined this proposal, reasoning that with an impending battle against Velgrynd, it was prudent to exercise caution. He believed there might be better opportunities for improvement in the future.
As expected of my lord, I understood now and will aim for a better method of improvement from greater heights.
Although Rimuru found it odd that Ciel's response included Diablo's catchphrase as expected of Rimuru-sama, he was relieved she accepted the proposal. Meanwhile, as Rimuru and Ciel were discussing these matters, the scorched dragon Velgrynd, flying in the sky, transformed into her human form and swung her azure dragon blade towards Rimuru. Both her human and dragon forms had equal attack power, but the human form was more energy efficient. The key difference lay in their defensive capabilities. The dragon form's massive size rendered small-scale physical and magical attacks virtually ineffective. Velgrynd chose to forsake this defensive advantage, intent on killing Rimuru even at the cost of her own protection. Approaching rapidly, Velgrind's fierce expression only accentuated her beauty. With a downward swing, she aimed to cleave Rimuru in half with her azure dragon blade. Rimuru, prepared, countered with his newly evolved mythic-grade Drago blade. The clash of these two mythic weapons sparked, resulting in a crack in Velgrind's blade. Seizing the opportunity, Rimuru exerted more force, shattering the azure dragon blade. Velgrynd, taken aback, retreated, unable to comprehend how her mythic-grade weapon could be so easily destroyed. Ciel explained that even among mythic-grade weapons, performance varied. Rimuru's Drago blade, crafted by Kurobe with utmost effort, was inherently superior to Velgrind's azure dragon blade, a mass-produced item solidified from Magicule. Unwilling to accept this, Velgrynd conjured another azure dragon blade and attacked again, only to have it shatter upon contact with the Drago blade. Finally accepting reality, Velgrynd, still furious, didn't give up. With weapons proven ineffective, she decided to use her body as a weapon. Extending her claws and assuming a Chinese martial arts stance, Rimuru responded by sheathing his weapon. Taunting Velgrynd, Rimuru suggested that using weapons was unfair, opting instead for a bare-handed fight. Provoked, Velgrynd rapidly closed in on Rimuru. Her speed was multiple times the speed of sound, a pace that would have troubled the pre-evolution Rimuru. However, things were different now. Ciel's accelerated thought process had evolved from 1,000,000 times to hundreds of millions, meaning a second in the real world could be extended to about 10 days. Rimuru could now perceive even things moving at the speed of light. As Rimuru goaded Velgrynd, he simultaneously employed teleportation magic to move behind her. Velgrynd promptly reacted, interfering with the surrounding space to block the teleportation. Without teleportation, Rimuru's physical speed couldn't surpass Velgrind's attacks, making her next strike seemingly inevitable. Velgrynd had never expected to use her true killer moves against a mere slime. If not for avenging Veldora, she might have even admired Rimuru as a formidable opponent. But she was certain everything would soon end. Velgrynd readied herself, channeling all her power into her body, transforming into a supersonic projectile, and unleashed her ultimate technique, cardinal acceleration. Unlike her previous techniques, this one used her body as a medium, not only more powerful but also capable of changing direction to pursue fleeing enemies. However, all of this fell within Ciel's expectations, or rather, was the result of Ciel's deliberate manipulation. From provoking Velgrynd to intentionally using teleportation, the goal was to instill in Velgrynd a false sense of certainty, prompting her to use her ultimate move. Ciel noted that everything was going as planned, with Lord of Gluttony deployed around Rimuru in all directions, ready to devour Velgrynd from any angle. A normal attempt to devour a scorched dragon would have met with fierce resistance, but if the dragon launched itself at them, the situation was entirely different. This was Ciel's strategy. The confident scorched dragon charged at the seemingly idle Rimuru and then suddenly vanished, having been devoured into the imaginary space. At the moment Velgrynd thought she had triumphed, she found herself in an unfamiliar space, leaving even her bewildered. Rimuru gleefully declared victory, stating that Velgrynd couldn't escape his imaginary space and should just stay put. Velgrynd couldn't believe what had happened, unable to comprehend her defeat. Rimuru suggested she ask Veldora for the details, which only added to her confusion. Wasn't Veldora already eliminated? Just then, Veldora made a dramatic appearance, greeting Velgrynd and commenting on her not-so-great situation. Seeing Veldora left Velgrynd even more perplexed. The siblings then engaged in a conversation. Thus, the battle between Rimuru and the two true dragons, catalyzed by the unique existence of Ciel, came to a perfect conclusion. Rewind the clock back a bit. Let's briefly summarize and fill in some details about the situation in Dwargon Nation during this period. Previously, we learned that Velgrynd annihilated 60,000 soldiers of the Composite Division in a single strike. She also utilized Kigali, controlled by Tatsuya Kondo, to produce several puppet bodies capable of hosting powerful spirits using Kigali's curse technique, Birthday. Additionally, the three primordial demons sustained severe injuries while battling Velgrynd, putting them at a significant disadvantage. For others, the situation was similar. Gabbro's opponent was Marco, a top-ranked fighter among the Imperial Guardians, ranked 8th. As mentioned before, single-digit Imperial Guardians could borrow Emperor Rudra's ultimate skill. Despite awakening as a Guardian Lord, Gabbro's survival was precarious. In a crucial moment, Veyron and Zonda arrived to rescue Gabbro, narrowly averting his demise. Even together, Veyron and Zonda managed only to draw a stalemate against Marco. On another front, King Gazel and Hakura faced the Imperial Guardians' commander, Tatsuya Kondo. This battle was clearly a one-sided domination by Tatsuya Kondo. Interestingly, Hakuru, Tatsuya Kondo, and King Gazel all practiced the hazy-style swordsmanship from the same lineage. However, Tatsuya Kondo learned hazy style in another world from Jensei Araki, the younger brother of Hakura's grandfather, Byakuya Araki. Tatsuya was impressed by Hakuru's swordsmanship. Although he was no match in terms of power, Hakuru surpassed Tatsuya Kondo in sword skills alone. Despite being adversaries, Tatsuya accorded sufficient respect to Hakuru and King Gazel. As previously stated, only an ultimate skill can counter another ultimate skill. Facing Tatsuya Kondo, who had awakened his ultimate skill, Hakuru and Gazel stood no chance of victory. It's noteworthy that the battle involving these three also caught the attention of Ajura, who arrived at the scene. During this encounter, Hakuru questioned Ajura about his past, as Ajura bore a striking resemblance to Hakuru's grandfather and the founder of hazy style, Byakuya Araki. Ajura, having forgotten his past experiences, admitted he had retained a natural skill in swordsmanship since becoming a demon 300 years ago. The last significant figure was Gadra, who faced Velgrynd. However, Velgrynd didn't harm Gadra because he provided her with crucial information. During their standoff, Gadra questioned why Damrata prevented him from leaking information to Tatsuya Kondo, which could have minimized the Empire's losses. Velgrynd was clearly unaware of these matters. The key point came when Gadra suggested that Damrata's intentions might be connected to Masayuki in the Monster Federation labyrinth. He revealed that Masayuki bore an uncanny resemblance to Emperor Rudra, and that Damrata had deployed two top-ranked Imperial Guardians, Bernie and Jiwoo, to ensure Masayuki's safety from the beginning. This revelation left Velgrynd perplexed, as it was clear both Damrata and Tatsuya Kondo were aware of this, yet she had been kept in the dark about such vital information. Meanwhile, Velgrynd, engaged in battle with Veldora through another parallel existence, found herself struggling. Unable to ponder further, she decided to dissolve her parallel existence to focus solely on Veldora. Velgrynd then used the space-time connection magic, and countless airships emerged, belonging to the Magic Beast Division heading to Ingracia. Initially, Rimuru estimated that even with support, it would take the Magic Beast Division at least 3 days to reach the Dwargon Nation's battlefield. But Velgrynd's magic instantaneously summoned them back. After informing Tatsuya Kondo, Velgrynd dissolved her parallel existence, and Tatsuya Kondo used teleportation magic towards the Monster Federation. The following events led to Veldora being dominated by a coalition of Velgrynd, Rudra, and Tatsuya Kondo. Alright, that's all for this video. Next, we'll shift our focus to Emperor Rudra's airship, where the Monster Federation powerful executives will engage in an exciting battle against the Empire's warriors in the 8-Gate formation. But before that, in our next episode, I'll discuss the story of the Creator God, Star King Dragon Veldonava, and why Rimuru could evolve to a true dragon. The next episode promises to be thrilling, so don't miss it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.